Coming up on this week's show, J. Scott Coatsworth and Angel Martinez discuss Queer Sci-Fi's plans for world domination. AJ Marcus talks to us about his States of Love entry. Plus, we're unveiling a special giveaway just in time for the holidays.
Welcome to the Big Gay Fiction Podcast, the show for readers and writers of gay romance fiction. If you can read it, write it, watch it, or listen to it, these two guys are going to talk about it. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Adams and Will Knaus.
Welcome to episode 58 of Jeff and Will's Big Gay Fiction Podcast. I'm Jeff from JeffAdamsWrites.com.
And I'm Will from WillKnaus.com. I am going to start the banter and ask, how are you doing?
I'm okay. It's been a different kind of week. I was in LA this week. Of course, we also had an election this week that kind of blew the big one. I was in the camp that didn't think this could happen, that we could end up with Donald Trump as a president. Kind of surprised at how so many people voted. The thing that has struck me as interesting over the past few days, watching my Facebook feed and stuff, is that I know perfectly people who I thought were perfectly reasonable, and they probably still are perfectly reasonable, who voted for Trump, who don't seem to realize that they voted for the whole package that is Trump. They may say that, oh, I only voted because he's going to help the police department, or he's going to bring manufacturing jobs back and bolster the economy, or whatever. And they steadfastly are not in the racism, bullying, homophobia realm, except, you kind of voted his whole package in and all the people that come with him. There's a couple of articles that I've read in the last couple of days that really kind of drive this point home much more eloquently than I can. John Scalzi, did I get that right? Yay, me! The Cinemax Theory of Racism, which author Vanessa North and my husband put in front of me over the last couple of days. And Chuck Wendig's Stronger Together, but So Far Apart. I think both lay out some really good points on this part. If you voted for Trump, yes, you are 100% for everything he brought to the table. Whether you only wanted a part of that package or not, because he's not a Chinese menu. He's more like your cable company, as the Cinemax Theory points out. I expect that for myself, I'm going to be a lot more political in the next few years. Speaking loudly for some of the crap he and his cronies are going to bring to the table. I'm going to keep writing, though, and I'm going to keep writing the books for the world that I choose to envision us living in, which is, I suspect, not the world that he views. So that's kind of where I am this week.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling about things this week?
It was a very tough week for me. I was here at home by myself. Though if you were here with me, I don't think I would have been able to adequately express the difficulty I was having with the situation. I think a lot of us woke up on Wednesday and the world was literally upside down. It's so incomprehensible to so many of us, the world that we're currently living in right now. It's like, honest to God, it is like a Star Trek episode where they go into an alternate timeline and the Nazis won World War II. And I do not believe I am overstating the severity of our current situation. I truly believe it is that bad. Like Jeff, I have been reading a lot of stuff online this week. I want to point everyone to a piece that Chuck Wendig also wrote on his blog called Mourn, Then Get Mad, Then Get Busy. He much more eloquently states everything that I'm feeling right now. So I highly suggest you go to Chuck Wendig's website and check that out. We'll have a link to that specific article in the show notes.
Yes.
What I would like to say right now to all of our listeners is that I understand where you are. You're afraid, you're angry. I've been there too this week, trust me. I have been up and down the Kubler-Ross scale many times. Many times. And I think finally I am in a good headspace so that I can personally try and move forward. So, to everyone who is currently listening to this show, I would first like you to get your head right. Get your head and your heart right. I know this hurts a lot. We are all feeling it right now. The despair and the anger and the confusion. No one has the right to tell you to get over it. Okay? You do you, and you take all the time it needs for you to work through this situation and figure out where your head is at. So first, I think everyone needs to take, personal time and figure out their emotional place in this new world order, frankly. Number two, I want to make sure that everyone who is listening to this podcast make sure that they are physically safe. We have already seen instances of intimidation and violence in every state of this country already. So, and this is not a warning for everyone in, a red state, which a majority of the people who are listening to this show right now do live in a red state. It's not just about red states. It's blue states too. There are shitty, violent Trump supporters in blue states too. We all need to be careful and vigilant and aware. So, get your head straight, get your heart figured out, and make sure that you are in a safe place. And number three, earlier this week, I don't know why this came to me specifically. I just think I needed to remind myself of it. There's a line in Angels in America. The great work begins. So once you've got your shit figured out and you're safe, you need to start your great work. Because the world needs it now more than ever. Now, please don't be intimidated by the word great. Your great work can be anything. You need to figure that out for yourself. I can't tell you what your great work is going to be. Now, if you want to join a political action committee and start marching in the streets, that's awesome. You do you. If you are a queer person of color who is a really good baker, then you know what? You bake the best goddamn batch of cookies that you can, and you take them to your local senior center or Veterans Rec Center, and you sit down and you share those cookies, and you hear their stories, and you tell your story. So, I would recommend that everyone listening, once you've figured your stuff out, get ready to do great work. Because like I said, I think we need it now more than ever. I am still figuring out what my great work is going to be. I definitely believe this podcast is going to be part of it. I do feel that creating positive and entertaining content is worthwhile. So this is going to be part of my great work. So hopefully, we can all move forward in a positive, there aren't words. This is a really horrible, fantastically, inconceivably shitty situation that we're in right now. So, yeah, there aren't any words. I'm not trying to be negative or an alarmist, but I think we all have to be pragmatic and realistic about the situation we and the people that we love are in right now. So, get smart, get strong, and do great work.
So moving on from that, looking at other news that's in a slightly happier vein, and where our podcast usually goes.
Yeah.
NaNoWriMo, of course, is rolling on. We are 12 days in as we're recording.
Rolling. Sorry.
Thank you.
Keep going.
We're 12 days in
Yep.
as we record on Saturday, November 12th. For the work that we're working on, that's good double redundancy there, isn't it? We're 17,880 words in. Despite the crazy town of last week, I did, for the most part, write every morning that I was in LA. Got a little behind on the trip up coming back yesterday because, 6 o'clock in the morning on planes. It is what it is. And I haven't written yet today. But we're in a pretty good spot, I think, so far. And we'll keep plugging away on that. And, and hopefully by the time we talk next week, you'll have read some more of the stuff to see how we're doing.
Yes.
I mentioned last week that the short story, Rivals, was going to audio. Derrick McClain has done a fantastic job with this book. I got to proof it this morning. It being a short story, it clocks in at just under an hour and a half. So it's a quickie listen, but he's done a great job with it, and he's got a couple of edits to make on it, but we should be headed to ACX approval next week, and then it should be out. I think I said last week by the 1st of December, but it may actually get out even before Thanksgiving at the rate we're going.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, tell me, what's in the top 5 this week?
Okay, moving on to the top 5 segment of the show. I'm going to let you know that these are the top 5 best-selling romance titles in the Amazon US store for the week of November 13th, 2016.
Gay romance titles. You did say just romance titles. So.
Well, that's true. Duh.
Just specifying. Just specifying.
Yes, the gay romance titles in the US Amazon store. So coming in at number 5 is A Holiday Story, Gingerbread by Avery Ford. This one looks absolutely adorable. It's got the cutest cover ever. It is the story of a guy who owns and works in a bakery and a cop and all of the holiday warm and fuzzies that ensue when they get together.
Cool.
Looks extra super cute. Coming in number 4 is Falling Down, the latest title from Eli Easton. Number 3 is #Junkie, the first in the Gearshark series, and that's by Cambria Herbert.
I liked those covers too. We were looking at those before we recorded. I kind of like the GQ-ness of the covers.
The covers for this particular series are all done in a faux magazine style. They're really smart and very distinctive. So Gearshark. Blah, 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 blah.
That's going to be the sound of the show this week.
I know, both of us. We're having problems talking. #Junkie is the first in this particular series, and it came out a while ago. I think it's on sale, which is why it has jumped so far up in the top 5 rankings. Okay, moving on to number 2 is Husband to Make a Family, A Marriage of Convenience Romance from Devin Morgan. And number 1 is Dying to Be Loved, book number 1 in the Curl Up and Die mystery series, and that is by Amy Nicole Walker. And those are your top 5 romance titles, your gay romance titles, for the week beginning Sunday the 13th. Links for these titles can be found in the show notes page at biggayfictionpodcast.com. 'Tis the season, and we here at the Big Gay Fiction Podcast are in a giving mood.
Announcing our holiday paranormal paperback giveaway.
We're giving you, our valued listeners, a chance to win a prize package filled with great reads, perfect for cozy winter nights in front of the fire.
The grand prize package includes an autographed paperback of Soulstruck by Jacob Z. Flores, an autographed copy of The Grim Life by Katie Worth, plus paperbacks of Jake C. Wallace's Soul Seekers and Dare to Love Forever.
In addition, the grand prize winner and 4 runners-up will receive an Audible download code for TJ Kloon's Wolf Song, narrated by Kurt Graves.
To enter, go to the show notes page for this episode at biggayfictionpodcast.com or visit the official giveaway page at biggayfictionpodcast.com/holiday.
You can't win if you don't enter, so visit biggayfictionpodcast.com/holiday before the Rafflecopter ends on Sunday, December 11th.
So last week we started this segment where we have authors from the States of Love series coming on the show. My own States of Love book will be coming out in the springtime, but in the meantime I thought I would have other authors from this series come on and talk about their books. And this week we hear from A.J. Marcus, whose book is set in New Mexico. I'm happy to welcome A.J. Marcus to the podcast. A.J. is an author who's working on the States of Love series from Dreamspinner Press, and his novella, An Enchanting Liftoff, recently came out. AJ, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So tell us about this book that is set in New Mexico.
Yes. Well, it's a cute little love story of a guy who's a advertising executive who goes to the Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. Gotta get that right. For the first time, one of his friends introduces him to the pilot of Rising Pride, which is a balloon with various pride spectrums on it. The two hit it off, and they have a, shall we say, uplifting relationship.
I like that. Now, do you live in New Mexico, or did you just pick this state because you wanted to explore it a little bit?
I actually live in Colorado. I'd had the idea for the story for a while, and I'm going to back up just a little bit here. I'm actually the guy who came up with the overall idea for the States of Love.
Oh, very cool.
And one of my co-authors, Caitlin Rishi, and I discussed it, and we're like, okay, between the two of us, we don't want to write 50 novels to cover all this. So we pitched it to Dreamspinner, and they came back and said, it sounds great. Let's run with it. What state would you like to do? And I was like, I want New Mexico, because I think the Balloon Fiesta is something really cool. I've always loved going. I've been 3 or 4 times, and I was like, it's almost a perfect setting for me for two guys to meet and fall in love.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes perfect background. And I guess since you'd been 3 or 4 times, it certainly lessened your amount of research you had to do because you had firsthand experience.
You throw in lots of little things you've encountered along the way. Maybe not even stuff that I had encountered at the Balloon Fiesta, but things I had done in Albuquerque got merged into going to the Balloon Fiesta.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a restaurant. I've only been able to find it once because a friend of mine took me there, and they had wandering mariachis in the restaurant, and they were wandering around serenading people. And the food was excellent too, but the entertainment was cool. And so it's like I threw that in here because I was like, all right, that would be interesting, and just other little things that you encounter around the area, and I'm only a couple out, 6 out from Albuquerque. So it's a drive for me because I live out in the boonies. It takes me over an hour to get anywhere. So 6 hours isn't that.
No, not at all. Not at all. Well, we wish you great success with An Enchanting Liftoff.
All right. Well, thanks, Jeff.
So, Will, you have this tendency to post really cute boys reading books every few days. Where does that happen?
Where does it happen? It happens on our Facebook page. If you would like to be kept up to date with all the goings on at Big Gay Fiction Podcast and see the pictures of cute boys reading books.
Or sometimes cute boys listening to what we're sure is the Big Gay Fiction Podcast.
Yeah, you can check that out at
facebook.com/Big Gay Fiction Podcast.
Awesome.
And they're really good pictures, too. He's got great taste.
That's damn right I do.
Mm-hmm. So during GRL, we had the opportunity to take a few minutes and sit down with J. Scott Coatsworth and Angel Martinez to talk about the group that they both run called Queer Sci-Fi. So let's take a listen to that, and we'll get their origin story and hear about their plans for that world domination you heard about earlier. We're here with J. Scott Coatsworth and Angel Martinez from Queer Sci-Fi. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Give us the Queer Sci-Fi origin story.
Okay, well, Queer Sci-Fi is kind of misleading. We've talked about this a lot.
Yes.
It really is queer sci-fi, fantasy, paranormal, and horror. But I wanted a catchy title, and I wasn't really thinking too far ahead. And It could have been queer speculative fiction, but there's a lot of people that don't know what speculative fiction is, that it kind of is an umbrella term. I started it about, 2.5, almost 3 years ago now.
It's almost 3 years, yeah.
I had just come back to writing, and I wanted a place, a community that I could pull together people like me that read and wrote this kind of stuff. And there were a few things out there, but what I found was a little more limited. There were places that did more horror, places that did more sci-fi specifically. So I started this little tiny site and started going around looking for people to join me, and I found Angel pretty quickly.
Right, and I was actually adminning on a different gay science fiction site, and Scott just kind of kept after me until I agreed to work with. Yes, exactly. Right. Hey, are you ready to come work with me yet? Are you ready to come? So I came over, and we've been growing ever since, and we've been trying very hard to grow it into an inclusive community for the queer community. So it's not always just about gay and just about gay romance, but so we have, it's more welcoming for all of the colors of the rainbow. So we have a lot of lesbian writers and trans writers and
Ace
bisexual writers and ace writers. Yep, and
intersex,
and intersex.
Kind of the whole
right?
flavor of the rainbow.
Right. So we really try and keep it a welcoming and inclusive and safe environment for all of these folks.
But you forgot the world domination part.
Well, okay, yes, but that's what we do in private. We don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the group is primarily for writers and creatives, right?
No,
No?
it's pretty much half and half.
Okay.
We started out with a lot of writers, but we had some readers joining, and we really started to encourage readers to join. That was kind of a real drive. So we're at about half and half now. So writers and readers, and of course we always have to emphasize that most writers are also voracious readers too.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And when I first started the group too, it was a lot easier to identify people who were writers of the stuff than it is to try to find a reader of that. Because
Right.
readers are going to have multiple interests, and writers do too, but writers are generally going to have a page or a personality online, especially on Facebook, that kind of indicates that this is who they are and what they do. So it was a lot easier to track down those people to kind of start the core group. But we really have worked this last year to expand that out.
Right.
How would you say what are the roles essentially of the writers and the readers as they kind of come together? Is there a lot of beta reading going on? Is there a lot of resource sharing going on? What's the overall like almost day-to-day operation of the group kind of look like?
Sure. We have Me Monday, and the idea of Me Monday was for writers to be able to come in and promote their stuff once a week instead of letting the group become kind of overrun by promo. Because if you're members of any Facebook writing or reading groups, you know, a lot of them, that's what happens. You have people that come in and they just drive by, drop their promo, and they're gone.
Right. Buy my book, buy my book, buy my book.
So that's one of our main interfaces of the two, because you have writers come in and they're talking about their new stuff, and other writers and readers are coming in and supporting them and saying, you know, that's fantastic, you have that out. We do sell some books, not directly through the site, but people see it and they'll go and they'll buy the book on Amazon or buy it from the publisher or from the author. But we also have, every other day we do an author chat or we do a writer chat. And so those are chances for both sides to come in, but we restrict it. So if it's a writer chat, you know, you can come and you can say, yeah, I write this, this topic is kind of what I do, I in this book did this and that and the other thing, and readers can come chime in on that too. If it's a reader chat, the authors are forbidden from mentioning their works. So they can come and they can say, you know, I really like this, this is my kind of thing, but they can't say, oh, and yes, I have this book so-and-so that I do this thing that you're talking about.
Right.
So it really does kind of help make it more of a friendly atmosphere for readers to come in and chat and not just kind of be bombarded by authors who are trying to hit them up and sell them the books. Other than that, it's we also have the newsletter that goes out that kind of informs people about the information, but we try to include some information for readers as well, and just for general sci-fi, fantasy, paranormal, weird stuff going on in the world. Trailers as they come out for films that might be appropriate, gay superheroes, you know, so it's kind of a melange of everything.
It is, and the discussion topics that we have a discussion topic every day that we post early on, and people can chime in and discuss and debate and all sorts of things. And most of those are from our members. So we actually go out when we run out of things on the spreadsheet, and we say, what do you guys want to talk about? So they give us all of these incredible discussion topics that they want to cover, and some of them are really easy things, and some of them are very controversial, and
some are very esoteric.
Some of them are a little bit out there, but they actually give us these discussion topics, which we will get to. So one every day. We also have regular columnists who talk about different kinds of things, and we also have reviewers
Right.
who post on specific days about spec-fic that they've recently read. So
Yeah, we have one. Ben Brock does the adult stuff, and then
Right.
John Allenson has been doing the YA stuff, and we have other people that come in periodically and do reviews as well.
Right.
And I believe, Angel, you mentioned on the research panel that we sat on during GRL that you maintain a resource list as well for writers who need to know about certain things.
Right. We've actually set up several different listings for different types of things. So we have a subject matter expert listing. So we've had members say, "Okay, I'm a doctor. I can help you with this subject. I'm a lawyer. I'm a criminal justice professor.
I speak Italian.
I speak Italian." Everybody has these areas of expertise. So we have a subject matter expert list that we maintain. We also maintain a listing of queer-friendly conventions.
Angel put that together. It's a great list.
Oh boy, that was a fun thing to put together. We have lists of editors and publishers, and all of these folks who are willing to work with queer authors.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a knowledge base on there. We have cover designers too, and we're always
Right.
adding to that stuff as we go. I actually have to update the. I haven't updated the calls for submission list for a while, so I gotta go and
Oops.
update
Okay.
that.
Yes.
There's always like 45 things to do and time for 10.
Yes.
Of course,
Yeah.
yeah. So one of the things you do, and I think this was the second year you've done it, if I recall, is the anthology.
Yes, technically it's the third year. The first year we didn't do the book, so the first year when we did the
Well,
contest.
back up and say what it is.
Well,
first.
all right. So we do a flash fiction contest, and for those who don't know, flash fiction is really, really short fiction. It's not microfiction, which could be like a sentence or two story, but it's usually 1,000 words or less. In our particular definition of it, it's a story that's 300 words or less. We ask for a complete story that is both queer and it has LGBTIQA covered characters in the story.
And it has to be spec-fic.
Spec-fic, sorry. Thank you.
And it has to adhere to the theme for that year.
Yes.
So
And we make the themes broad. So our first year, as I was mentioning earlier,
right.
our first year was, what was our first year?
Endings.
Endings, thank
we
you.
did endings for the first one.
And we had 15 entries, and they were a nice 15 entries, not enough to do a book with.
Right.
The second year, we did Discovery,
Right.
and we got 110. And I was trying to be really nice, and I said, that anybody who was on theme and met their criteria would be in the book that we were going to do.
Right.
The book had actually been suggested by one of the other people we worked with, and they were going to help us with it, but they were not able to help us sell it. And
Right. Or actually produce it.
Right. So
Right.
then Angel, I said, we'll have this ebook, but we have no infrastructure because we're not a publisher at this point, So Angel at that point talked to Mr. Corner, who she's a part of,
Right.
and agreed to help us do the book. So they did convince me that this year, when the theme was flight, that we had to be a little more selective in the stories. And fortunately, we got 172 stories this year.
Right.
So we chose 110 again of those stories
Right.
for this year. We try to make the theme broad enough that you can really play with it. So like with flight, you could be flying. You could be an angel, you could be a demon, you could be what have you. You could be a spaceship and taking flight. You could be fleeing from something.
Right.
You could do a flight of stairs. You could do a flight of wines.
Right.
I mean, anything that you can come up with that ties in, as long as it ties into that theme of flight.
Right.
is acceptable.
And we actually run it as a contest. So I think that's probably why every year we've gotten
Right.
successively more submissions. So the top 3 entries actually do have monetary prize attached to them, and they are recognized in the anthology as well. So we do, say who the winners are, of course. So I think that's probably why we're getting more submissions.
Yeah.
But 172 submissions, we were very surprised. This is a lot of flash fiction to read through.
Unfortunately, they're 300 words, so it's basically like a page and a half. And so it does make it possible. If we were doing this
Sure.
contest and it was a regular, like a 5,000, 10,000 word short story, and we had
Right.
172 entries, we'd never get it done.
we would have no life.
Yeah.
It
But yeah, it's been a lot of fun to do.
was, yeah.
When will that circle up again next for listeners who may be thinking about this?
April.
We'll probably start it a little bit earlier. I
You want
think
to?
this coming year, yeah. But we'll have to start promoting the theme, and we'll probably start talking about taking submissions in early spring.
Yeah, we like to kind of leak the theme a little early so that people kind of have a chance to start
So
thinking
they're
about
thinking about it.
Because It's a challenge. I mean, we had a lot of authors that told us that they would write a story and it'd be 1,000 words or 1,500 words, and that would take them, a couple hours, and then they would spend a week after that getting that story down from 1,000 words to 300 words.
Sure.
Right.
When you write this, it's a real challenge for an author because you have to really think it through, and every single word that you use has to have a reason for being in that story.
Right.
So it's a fun exercise to put our writers through, and
It is, yeah.
they love us for it, and they kind of hate us.
But it's their choice. They don't have to
They
participate.
don't have to do it. They don't have to do it. No. Well, this year we did a neat thing too. We actually had 6 judges. So it was
Right.
Angel and I, and Ben Brock, Adie Ladner, Jen Burke, and Carol Cummings.
Yep.
And our opinions were kind of all over the map, and so all of us had a few favorite stories that were really nobody else's favorite stories, and then we had some in common. And
Mhm.
we do like a numerical judging, and then when we're done, we spend a couple days just talking it out and picking the winners as a group. But we all ended up with some stories that we really thought deserved recognition that didn't win, that weren't in the top 3. And so we said, why don't we do a judge's choice? Thank you.
Right.
And recognize those stories, even though there's not a monetary prize, but say this was that judge's favorite story. Have the judge contact the author directly, let them know what they really liked about that story. And you had a really neat one this year.
I did, because we do judging blind, so we never know who the author is when we're doing the judging. And I had this story that I thought was just amazing. There was so much emotion packed into the story, and it was just this really, really lush, descriptive story. And I picked that as my judge's pick, and afterwards found out that it was our only underage author who had submitted the story. So that was just really, really cool to me, to be able to write this young lady and say, oh my God, I really loved your story, and here's why.
First time author, so it was
Right,
nice to do that.
right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How much first-time author outreach and participation do you get? And is that kind of part of what you want to do overall to bring more people into the fold, or?
I think we do want to encourage people to kind of spread their wings and try it. I'd say that probably the majority of our authors are people who already write.
Mm-hmm.
So these are folks who have some experience, because flash fiction is a very difficult medium,
Mhm.
and it's not something that I would normally suggest for a first story. But I'd say, maybe 15, 20-ish%
It's that high, but we do
the
encourage it. Yeah.
entries, are probably folks who are not who have not shared stories with the public previously. Yeah.
And we go out and there's a lot of calls for submission sites on Facebook that we go out to and let people know. So we encourage anybody. You don't have to be an existing published writer. You don't even have to have written it all before if you want to try it.
Yep.
But I think the other thing that this lends itself to, and I was talking about this earlier with someone, is writers taking chances that they wouldn't necessarily take in longer fiction.
Right.
Writing characters, for instance, you might have a gay author writing a transgender character, and something that they would be more uncomfortable trying to do like an entire novella or short story or novel in, but they'll try their hand at it in this format because it's a lot less time to try to deal with a particular character. So I think you get a lot of people that are writing different things.
And we have a lot of authors who are normally romance writers, and this gives them a chance to write something completely different very often. So they're writing something that's purely speculative fiction, that's just this really short, tight format story, and I think they really enjoy that. It's just kind of a stretch for them. So,
And we encourage romance in the stories too. It runs the whole gamut in there.
Right,
So.
right. But you don't have a lot of time
Right.
for that. So
I'm often accused of like getting my characters together too fast, and it's fate, and they're in love already and everything. 300 words, try to get a couple together, and it's really hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's barely enough for the cute meat at 300 words.
Yeah, there it is.
Right. I'm curious about the what's the word I'm looking for? The intention of the contest. I think it's interesting to see how it's grown, certainly over the past 3 years. But originally, was it just so hey, let's do a flash fiction contest? Was it about maybe more representation? Or what was sort of the original intention
I
behind
think the original
contest?
intention was, hey, let's put on a play.
Yeah, exactly.
It was the original
Right.
intention was exactly we had been talking about flash fiction in the group, and
okay.
people were kind of fascinated by the concept, and so we said, okay, let's do a contest. This will be fun. Yay! Come on, guys, submit stories. But as we've gone on, we've really encouraged the authors to be more inclusive and to try and write outside their comfort zone. So we do kind of push authors to think about some of these things.
Yeah, I'd say the first one, it really was just kind of a lark to do it. It's something that we wanted to have another feature of the site, another thing that we would do on an annual basis. And the first, I don't remember all of the 15 first stories, but I do think there was a lot of MM in those first 15.
It was mostly gay
male, yeah.
pairings. Yeah.
Where the second one, we really encouraged folks, and we got a smattering of FF fiction, female family fiction. We got a little bit of trans.
There were 3 asexual stories in that second batch, so we did start to see some diversity.
And I think the quality of the third one, the quality of Flight, just in terms of the story quality overall, and partly because we had more to choose from, I think the quality really went up, and we actually had one of the winning stories was an FF story this year. Another one was sort of a gender fluid story.
Yes, yeah.
Right. Not transgender stuff, but kind of gender fluid.
It was definitely a gender queer young person in that story. Yeah.
So whereas I think the first 2 years, I think the top winner were MM, just because that was the majority of what was there.
Yes, yeah.
And we really wanted to try to find stories to recognize that were outside of that. So as each year kind of goes on, I think it's a matter of more people coming to the contest, but I think there's also been a bit of a sea change the last couple of years in romance and fiction, where people are starting to really try to stretch a little bit, going more into writing ace characters or writing trans characters or writing intersex characters.
Absolutely.
So.
Yep.
And that kind of leads to a broader question. Where do you see the queer sci-fi umbrella going now that as you said, it's more than MM and it's starting to embrace the rainbow? How's the genre evolving overall these days, and where do you see it kind of going?
As much as we would love to see change come all at once, we recognize that this kind of change is very slow. We'd love to see the entire spectrum of characters in mainstream fiction, in romance fiction, in all of the publishers that we're all familiar with. But the change is slow, and we recognize that. Mainstream speculative fiction, although there have always been queer elements in speculative fiction, everybody can point to an author in every decade that has written gay characters or lesbian characters, but generally speaking, it's been a very small percentage. We'd love to see a diverse spectrum of stories in mainstream as well. So it's kind of what we're working towards, but we recognize that this is a slow process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I came to this from more of a general sci-fi background, and I had only read very few things that ever had gay characters that were in sci-fi fantasy. Those are my main 2 genres I read. And when I came into this, I hadn't really read anything at all that was in MM. I didn't really know MM other than the mainstream stuff that my husband reads a lot of contemporary.
Right. Right. And when Scott's saying MM, just so we know, he's talking about romance.
Okay.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, but just in general, in terms of gay fiction, I hadn't read, whether it's MM or general literature, literary fiction or that. I really hadn't read much of anything except for a couple things in sci-fi.
Right.
And so
the few things that you had found, like Mercedes Lackey and folks like that.
And so I think what I've realized the last couple of years is there is so much energy going on right now in this particular market, in the romance market, but also kind of bleeding over into general sci-fi, speculative fiction, paranormal, etc. And I think I'm hoping that that's going to start to bleed into the mainstream more as some of our authors both see success within kind of our happy little community here, but also start to kind of move a little bit into the mainstream themselves and get agents and get some stuff published with some of the bigger pubs.
And what we look at is kind of a self-perpetuating cycle, because if you have books that are successful, the publishers see that they are successful and they recognize that, and they begin to see that there is a market. Whereas before, very often a publisher would publish a science fiction story with a gay character, it wouldn't sell. They said, oh, well, this wouldn't work,
right.
So they wouldn't publish those. But if we kind of from a groundswell, grassroots movement can get some of these folks to be successful, we're at a point now in the publishing industry where the publishers are going to start to sit up and take notice.
It's interesting you said that, though, because I was talking with Heather Rose Jones
Yeah.
about FF, and it was saying the same thing, that we have these publishers now in our community that do male or romance and that, and some of them have tried to branch out into FF, and they'll do one book, and they won't really know how to support it, and the book won't do well, and then they'll say, "Oh, FF doesn't sell."
Right.
You know, so we have to kind of get past that mindset, and that yes, there's always going to be a core group of readers that wants a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got these Dream Spinner throwback books that they're doing now, the Harlequin ones, that are very simple, not simple, but I mean very trope driven, very formula in a way, and they kind of feed that fantasy getaway. I don't have to worry about things. I'm going to get my happy ending. Mm-hmm. And you've got readers that's what they really want, and more power to them. You know, but I also want to see us kind of moving into other things as well and doing more complex stories, more other characters, and there's going to be an audience for that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Speaking to audience, do you think? How do I want to phrase that? Do you think the audience for Queer Sci-Fi is romance readers who are looking for romance with sci-fi in it, or is it sci-fi readers,
yes,
who are looking to read sci-fi with a romance or relationship element?
The answer to your question is yes.
Yes.
Both.
Yeah, it is. It really is both. And the interesting thing that we see on our group is that we have a meeting of these two groups.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of colliding. You got chocolate in my peanut butter.
Exactly.
Peanut butter in my chocolate.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and it's really interesting, and to expose both of these halves of the equation to each other, I think only makes us stronger and allows us to expand the market.
Okay.
So,
Yes, sci-fi for a long time has been a very not exclusive, but you had to kind of meet certain criteria as a writer to get into the sci-fi group. You know, you had to be published in certain publications, and you had to do certain things. And I think there's still an element of that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's in some parts of the community, or the sci-fi community and fantasy community, there's still kind of like, you're not really a sci-fi writer because you have romance and you've got your peanut butter and your chocolate.
Yes, right. Yeah.
But
there's still that perception among certain elements of the community, but I think those elements are mostly the older elements, and they're slowly dying out.
And one of the things, one of my projects this next year is to try to basically break through and get into some of those sci-fi blogs and communities and things that are not queer sci-fi communities, but that are sci-fi generally, and make some connections with those people, so that we're not, we have such a great, again, a community, but we're kind of insular, so we're always talking to ourselves,
right?
And to start talking as a community to these other communities.
Right. I mean, we talk a lot about the ghettoization of queer fiction, and that's we've done it to ourselves to a large extent, because we feel safe. We have a more welcoming audience. We have a more welcoming experience. But yeah, I think it's time that we no longer think of that exclusively, those channels. Yeah.
It's a safe, happy place.
It is.
Kind of jumping off from something that you talking about working on that over the next year. What are the future plans for Queer Sci-Fi towards world domination?
So I have a few things I want to kind of pursue. We're starting to do some book tours, and again, I want to use this kind of outreach into the general sci-fi community so that we can provide a service to authors that is not exactly like anybody else is doing. There's some great book tour companies out there that already do our community, but I'd like to have kind of something that gets you into both the romance blogs, but also get you into some of the sci-fi blogs as well. So that's a piece of that. I would like to see Queer Sci-Fi at some point do a little more publishing, whether that is working more like with Mr. Corner Books on some things, whether that's eventually doing some things directly.
Right.
As me as an author, I also want to get into that. So there's kind of that shared desire to figure that whole thing out. A lot of authors are hybrid authors, where you've got some books with Dream Spinner, Riptide, or Pride, and then you do some of your own stuff, or your stuff comes back from those publishers and you turn it around and you re-release it under your own name. So those are a couple of the areas I want to go into. Do you have anything that you've been thinking about that we could do? I mean, we bounce things off each other a lot.
Don't put me on the spot or anything.
Well, all right. You had like 3 minutes while I've been like babbling on here to think about it.
Yeah, but no, what Scott is saying, that this whole focus of really trying to expand the market for our members and trying to get out there to a larger audience. And I think that's probably always been the goal, but to try and do that in a larger sense is where we're headed next.
And I think to Will's point, there's a big desire on a lot of our authors that write, like Angel's pointed out to me, they write stuff that has a romance in it, but the romance isn't the point of the story. So it really is not romance per se.
Right.
There's a desire on those authors to be able to reach these other markets. And I know, like Andrew Gordon has been working really hard to try to get into some of those places. Some other authors have been trying to really make those inroads. So I think we want to support that both. I mean, within the group, we're already there, but reaching out to other places and trying to help those authors get into places that they haven't been able to get into yet, and kind of then we can kind of tag along.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Infiltration of the marketplace.
Exactly.
here's an on-the-spot question.
Okay.
If you had to name a book or two as like a primer towards queer sci-fi for somebody on a reader side who wanted to dabble their toes and see what that is like, what would you name?
I'm going to let you start with this one.
Are we talking about what's out there already in the mainstream, or what we have in the more insular community?
I'd say really either way. Like if I wanted to go, if you were to tell, if you and I were just having a conversation, like, what should I go read to help me understand queer sci-fi?
After, of course, they read Flight.
After,
After they bought the Anthology, what else should they look into?
Very nice.
I don't know. There's so much out there, and it really kind of depends on what you like to read. So we can talk about space opera stories. We can talk about post-apocalyptic stories. We can talk about fantasy stories. And I don't know if there's any one work that I could really point to.
Maybe a better question is there a resource on the site where if I come on the site and go, I really want to read a space opera, but I don't quite know where to start?
We don't have a database for that because it would be enormous and incredibly difficult to maintain. However, because of the way the discussion site is set up, you can come, if you're a member, you can come in there anytime and ask a question like that. I'm looking for a space opera with a green alien love interest, and people will give you recommendations. We have almost 2,000 members now, and we have this huge database of readers who love the genre, and they will come with all of these incredible recommendations, some of which we've all heard of and some of which we haven't. So
that's a perfect resource there, and I got to assume anybody can come join the group.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. We also we do announcements on a daily basis, and the announcements are categorized through the WordPress system, so you can actually go through and look at the categories on the site if you wanted something that was shifters, or if you wanted something that was specifically superheroes and villains, or so you can kind of go back and see what's there. We don't review those. I mean, there are reviews on some stuff, but the announcements are just announcements. You can kind of go through and I would say there are also so one of my personal favorites, and this was before I even came to Queer Sci-Fi, was a book by Nancy Springer called Lark on the Wing. That it's a magical realism story about this housewife, and she's a straight cisgender woman, but the idea is that each person in them has a person that they are meant to be, and the thing she's meant to be is a gay man. It's her spirit, and so there's this gay street in the middle. It's like I think it's in Pittsburgh. It's set, and you go down a certain street and kind of turn left at the right place, and there's a person there that will help bring out your real person. And that was one of my earliest things I read, and it just was a magical realism. Was one of the things that inspires me in what I do. There are a lot of publishers now that are kind of moving into doing more of the stuff. I know Dream Spinner has the DSP publications where you have stuff that is romance, or has romance, or could have romance, but is not romance driven. So that's a good place to find a lot of our authors.
Right. So if you look at something like Carol Cummings' steampunk western adventure, it's Blue on Black. Was that? Yeah, Blue on Black, which is primarily an adventure story, but there is a romance somewhere in the center of that story. So,
but like Angel said too, there's a lot of people who come on and say, I've got a 15-year-old niece who's just come out as lesbian, or I've got a transgender friend, and what would they like to read? And people will jump in and say, there's this and this and this and this and this, and you'll get 20 recommendations.
Right.
That's perfect.
Yep.
So let's talk about you guys as authors for a moment. What do you guys have coming up that's in that queer sci-fi genre?
Go ahead, you go.
All right. So I'm just kind of hitting my writing stride. I started out, started back writing again about 3 years ago, and I kind of started doing short stories and novellas because I felt like my writing muscles were a bit flabby. So I've kind of toned those muscles a little bit. It's a lifelong process, and I'll still be working on them. But I just sold my first novel.
Yes.
That's coming out. It's called Skythane, and it's the first of a series. It's a wingman story, so if you like guys with wings. Coming out from Dream Spinner in February or March. Also have another one that Dream Spinner is looking at that, of course, I have to finish it at the end of the year. It's sort of an epic space, not a space opera, but kind of an epic space story about the colonization of another world.
Right.
So that one is currently called Across the Stark Divide, and I'm not married to that title, so we'll see.
Yeah,
But yeah,
Sounds like Angel might be less married to that.
and then I have a short story that is going to be in the Christmas Anthology.
Yeah.
Mr. Corner Books.
This Wish Tonight is the name of the anthology. So.
Right, and that's a after zombie. No zombies in it.
Right.
But post-zombie apocalypse, OCD 40-year-old love story.
So yeah, it's not every day that you get a post-apoc story in a Christmas anthology, but yeah. So we have some fun with that. So.
And then there's one more that you guys are doing, the Great North, which was also I did 2 post-apocalyptic stories in a row. I don't know why, but it is it's a future kind of sort of a medieval setting, kind of in the future. It's going to be a standalone novella next year sometime.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm currently working on the 5th Brandywine investigation story,
Yay!
which is it's gods in the modern world. The gods don't have enough worshippers, so they need jobs. So it's a fun concept. It's mostly it's urban fantasy. It's kind of action adventure, and I do have a novella size standalone story that's coming out in January. It's called Uncommonly Tidy Poltergeists, which is sort of a folktale urban fantasy, and I don't want to say too much about it because it would be giving everything away. So.
Is the one I read in beta?
Yes.
I love that story.
It is. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, cool.
And Angel's also been doing a lot of re-releasing of stories this last year and extending and.
This is so not my choice doing this, but but I've had unfortunately some publishers close in the last couple of years, so it has to be done. So anyway.
So where can we find Queer Sci-Fi online?
All right, it's in a couple places. If you go to qsf.rocks is our short name, that'll take you right to the queersci-fi.com page. We also have the Queer Sci-Fi Facebook group, and the Facebook group is where all the stuff really happens, the most active part of the site, of the group. If you go to Facebook and look up Queer Sci-Fi, you'll see 2. One is a page, one is a group. The group has about 2,000 members, give or take now. If you go there and join it, we'll go into preview, and that's where we do all the daily conversations and the Mimi Monday and all of.
Awesome. Well, we'll link up to all that in the show notes, as well as linking to your author pages so people can find you guys as well in your books.
All right.
And we thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks
guys.
for
It was
having
great.
us. Yep.
So once again, thank you to Angel and Scott for taking a few minutes out of their busy GRL schedules to sit down and talk to us about the new anthology and QSF. I love them to pieces.
They are.
We got to know them a little bit better over the few days of the conference. They are smart, and they are funny, and they are talented, and as you can hear from the interview, they're very well spoken. If you would like to hear more from the two of them, Angel and Scott actually just appeared on episode 83 of the Wrote podcast. That's WROTE. And they went into more detail about their experiences about this past GRL in Kansas City. Now, in our wrap-up of GRL, because of the way this particular show is laid out and segmented, we don't really have any time to go on at length. Even in our episode about our wrap-up of our GRL experience, it basically amounted to, yay, we love GRL, rah-rah! Angel and Scott go into much more detail in this particular episode of the Wrote podcast, and they talk about their experiences at this conference, and they also talk about what you can expect going to the conference as a reader and going to the conference as a writer, and what you are going to experience throughout the entire weekend. So if you've never been to GRL and are curious about what it's really like, I highly recommend you give that episode of the Rote podcast a listen. That's episode 83.
Cool. And we'll link to that in the show notes.
Yes.
So that people can easily find it. So I think that does it for this week.
Mm-hmm.
Next week, we've got Lisa from the Novel Approach here. She's going to stop by with some holiday book recommendations since we are in that time of the year.
Yeah.
All right. So we hope all of you have a good week. And we'll see you back here for episode 59.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to Jeff and Will's Big Gay Fiction Podcast. New episodes are available every Monday at iTunes and other major podcast outlets. While there, subscribe to the show and please consider leaving a review. For detailed show notes, links, and to sign up for the monthly newsletter, visit biggayfictionpodcast.com.